tidied it out recently. There's a bit of space you can probably see at the top corner. I don't know if it's left hand or right hand for you, but I've had a good clear out because the books keep coming in. So
Do they?
I
That's
need to
nice.
keep making space. It's a lovely problem.
It is nice. It's nice to be given books. I imagine you've got to make space for your own books as well.
Yes, they're sort of above my head, kind of other side.
Yeah.
There. I think
Yeah, I
this.
thought I recognised the spines. Just.
Yes, I can't. Maybe just going the other way round, and I can't. I've no coordination. I can't do it.
Well, we are now live. So welcome to everybody that's joined us today. Thank you very much. My name is Claire. I'm from Listening Books, and this is, of course, Marion Todd, who's joining us
Hello.
for the Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions for Marion in the comments. I will read those out for you. And introduce yourself. Where are you joining us from? And Marion, I think you are in Scotland.
I am. Yes, I'm in northeast Fife, which is probably about not quite halfway up Scotland, 60 miles north of Edinburgh, if that helps.
Oh wow. Okay, so I've only ever been as far as Edinburgh. So
okay, if you cross the River Forth and you keep going,
for
another 50, 55 miles, then you come to me.
Brilliant.
How
is the weather with you?
Weekend, actually, for the rugby.
Oh,
it was great.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it good? Was it very busy? I imagine it's quite
it was
an
packed,
event.
absolutely packed. And Scotland won, which was excellent. It's unsurprisingly. So apologies
I imagine
if there are any Australians in the audience.
Oh, but it's nice to win in your home country.
It is.
It
was great atmosphere, good fun.
I've only ever been to one rugby game I can remember, but it was amazing. It's an amazing atmosphere when you're in there and in the stadium, and it's a fantastic sport, definitely.
I know nothing about it. Don't any of the rules. I just clap when other people are clapping. But it's very.
Oh yeah, exciting. I don't know the rules. No. If everyone cheers, I feel like that's the point to cheer.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm going to jump in with a few questions then. So, Tartan Noir is what your books have been described as. I don't really know that term very well. Is that something that you're happy with, that you understand, that you think applies to your novels?
I love it. It was, I don't know who first coined it. We have a very successful, popular crime writing festival in Scotland called Bloody Scotland that takes place in Stirling, lovely historic town, in September every year. And I think it may have come out of that. I'm not absolutely sure, but it really refers to Scottish, the tartan, dark books, noir. So any kind of crime fiction or thrillers or even cozy crime comes under the Tartan Noir umbrella. And I love it because I think it's quite a good marketing tool. People think, because Scotland is popular with people who perhaps have a connection with Scotland. Lots of people in Canada have relatives in Scotland. So my books actually sell, strangely, quite well in Canada. So I think the association with Scotland from a writing point of view is quite a good one. So yes, obviously I'm Scottish as well, so books are set in Scotland. But yes, I like the label.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, I think it sounds like it's the right label for the books, definitely. So you've had quite a varied work career. I mean, you didn't start out as an author. How is that something you've always wanted to do, and then it's kind of you've led up to that, or it was a bit of a tangent?
I think everybody who's published has always wanted to write, and I never thought I could do it. I didn't think I was clever enough or well educated enough, and I thought it was maybe something I could do for fun, and perhaps, as I did, sell the odd short story to a magazine and maybe make a little bit of pin money. I think I remember being paid £45 for a short story and thinking I had won the lottery because this seemed like a fortune. That was a while ago, obviously. Excuse me. So I started out working for a kind of investment company, and then I worked in a college as well. And then I took 10 years out of the workplace while I was having children, which was, it was lovely. Very, very lucky to be able to stay at home with them. Well, that was my choice. And I was fortunate that we could afford for me to stay at home. And when I went back to work, I started doing learning support in schools. And then I moved on to lecturing in my local college. And I did a lot of writing there because I was writing case studies for students, scenarios and exercises, and sort of using up my creativity then. And in the meantime, I was growing plants, which I did for a few years, probably about 3 years for a living, because I've got a huge greenhouse. And then I went from that into candle making, which was just for fun, really. But again, I did that for about 5 years. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Excuse me. And again, all sort of, the parts that I enjoyed were the marketing and the thinking what to call the candles, how to make them sound as though they were exotic and things like that. So I guess it's all a kind of creativity. But do excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Oh no, don't worry.
It was when I decided to leave work and take early retirement. I was like counting the days until I could take my pension at the absolute earliest minute, that I thought, right, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be one of these people that's sort of sitting on my deathbed thinking, I could have written a book. So I thought, yeah, time to see if I can do it. So I guess all the different experiences of life, particularly working in the college, where I met a huge variety of people with different backgrounds and life experience. That all feeds into the creativity. So I'm very grateful for having had a varied work experience, I suppose, because that really has, it helps me with writing. I'm constantly drawing on people I've met and events that I've experienced to think how I could put them into books.
Did you find it hard to get started with that first book?
Yeah.
Knowing where to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of, so I didn't really think I could write crime fiction. I thought I didn't have the right sort of brain, but I loved reading it. And I thought I'll try to write something different, which didn't really work very well. And then I read a book by Kate Atkinson, wonderful writer, called One Good Turn. And it's a crime novel that's set in Edinburgh during the festival. And it begins with a road rage incident with one car ramming into the back of another when the one in front does an emergency stop. And there are people standing in a queue waiting to go into a festival venue. And there's the two drivers get out, and one of them is a kind of big, thick, wall puncher with a shaved head. And he produces a baseball bat and sets about the other guy. And then someone in the crowd throws a laptop case, and that disorientates him. And every single person in that scene matters, but you don't know why. And so I thought, right, I want to try and write something like that. So I did. I wrote a book where I had a character, a really horrible character that was drawn on someone I actually wanted to kill in real life, but they don't let you do it. It's against the law. So don't try that at home. So I popped him in a book and killed him there. And it's a wonderful revenge being a writer. You can do all these things. And I had done what Kate had done in this book, written it from different points of view, all the different characters. And I was advised by an editor that the strongest part of the writing was the police elements, because I had this character killed and I let the killer get away with it, which was my ultimate revenge. But because there had been a killing, a murder, there was a police officer who wandered into the book to try and investigate it and concluded that they would never find the killer. And that was my detective, Clare Mackay. And so when I wasn't successful in selling that book, I thought, right, let's take that piece of advice about writing from the police's point of view. And I then wrote a completely different novel, which was all from the detective's point of view. So the reader was only seeing what she was seeing. And that became my first published novel, See Them Run. But even after I'd written that, it went through a couple of versions and lots of rejections. So for anyone keen to be published, persistence is what you need. Absolutely keep going. Don't give up. It took me a long time, but got there in the end.
Did you ever kind of consider self-publishing? I know that's something that's
Yes, I
happened in
did. I
previous
did.
years.
I was probably a few weeks from self-publishing. I had decided that when 2019 came, I was going to be published one way or the other. And I was sitting watching Strictly one Saturday night in December 2018 when an email popped up from a lady who is now my agent. And it was, I enjoyed the 3 chapters that you sent, because usually what you do is you send 3 chapters and a synopsis, which gives the rest of the plot. And she said, could you send me the rest of it? I'd like to read it. Now, this had happened to me before, twice already, and nothing had come of it. So I wasn't excited at all. I just said, oh, yes, okay. I sent back a lovely email, very polite, and saying, thank you so much. And if you don't have time to read it before, happy Christmas. You know, it's nice to be nice. Publishing is a very small village.
Yeah.
And come January, I hadn't heard anything. So I was busy working on book covers and thinking how I would market it. Could I afford to pay a publicist? I was planning what I was going to do. And I had written the second book by this stage. So my plan was to put the first book up on Kindle free in the hope that people would download it because it was free, enjoy it, and pay for the second. And that was the strategy. And I think it was about the 9th of January, my agent emailed again to say, I'm so sorry for the delay. I'd like to talk to my colleagues about this book. Can I phone you in a couple of days? And that was, I thought,
Oh, that's amazing.
even if it doesn't happen from this point forward, someone has believed in me. And that was the most exciting thing.
Yeah, it definitely would be exciting, especially you've taken that long and you've put so much effort into it as well. So we have, I'm just having a quick look at the chat and the comments. So we've got some people from Cambridge here joining us. I know we've definitely got people from London as well.
Hello.
Hello, Jenny. Thanks for joining us. So she's asking, where do you get the idea for your characters from? Do they develop with the story, or are they generally based on people you know?
Okay. Usually what I do is I start with the crime, because I find characterization the most difficult part of writing. Lots of my author friends, they start with the characters, and that is probably what you should do. But because I find it difficult and because I love plotting, I'll start to think, right, what sort of crime do I want to write with this time? Then I'll think of a rough plot. And at that point, I have to think about character motivation, because you can't just have motiveless crimes. There needs to be a backstory of some sort. And at that point, I start thinking about character. And often the type of crime will inform who the character is. And sometimes you want to flip that because you want to subvert the reader's expectations. So, for example, I wrote a plot about domestic violence in one of the books, but the victim was the husband and not the wife. And once I know who the victim is and who the criminal is, I'll then start to work out who they are and what sort of people they are, and in my head, what they look like. I do draw on people that I have known, but I don't think I have anyone who is a complete copy of a person I've met. It's a kind of hybridizing process. I'll start with someone's face, but I'll maybe ascribe different personality traits to them. In one of the books, I think it was the 5th book, called Next in Line, I decided that I was going to kill a man on his 40th birthday. And he had rented a very fancy, expensive house just outside St Andrews, and had invited his 3 oldest friends to celebrate his birthday with him for the weekend. And I then realised at this point, I had 4 40-year-old men, and I had to make them all different. And that was, I thought, oh, we're going to do this. So in the end, I went on to Google and I typed in Scottish actors, well, not Scottish, I think just actors, male actors, 40s. And I had a look at faces, and I found 3 completely different faces, printed them out, pinned them up on my wall. And I looked at them and I would think about them and think, right, who are you? What's your name? And that was how I did that. Usually it's an easier process than that. So it will go crime, those involved. Then I'll usually pick a name that suits the crime. So that's maybe a bit, I'll change it a bit, but if I'm going to have someone do something really gruesome and horrible, they're not going to be called, well, I don't know, Susanna or something. Well, maybe they should be. I'll try and think of a name that fits the way the person is working in my head. And sometimes I'll go for a photograph. Mostly I don't need photographs, but it's a very organic process. And there'll be points when I'm writing the book when I think, actually, this person is slightly different to what I thought, and I'll have to go back and unpick and colour them in, I suppose, is the way I would describe it. And sometimes my editor will say to me, I don't really get this character, can you flesh them out a bit? So that's the hardest bit for me.
It sounds hard. That was a great question, Jenny. Thank you.
It sounds harder than it is. A great question, Jenny. Thank you for asking.
Actually, that does remind me of a question I had about your main detective, who is across all of the books, because I've read the first book in the series, and I've now read the latest one, which is Bridges to Burn, and she changes a lot throughout that series, and her relationships with the different other characters that are kind of consistent throughout. And is that something you plan? If you intend to write a series like this, do you plan for a character to grow organically, or is it
I think you
more
have
episodic as you write?
So I don't have an overarching plan. I don't know how the series might end if it ends. I've no plans to end it at the moment, but I don't have a kind of, finally I'm going to kill Clare off or send her to the other side of the world or into space. I've no idea. I don't really work any further forward than the book I'm writing at the time, but I do think it's important to move the characters on in their lives. And I try to think, when I leave off one book, I try to think, right, that's where Clare was at the end of that book. So I need to pick her up maybe a few months down the line when we start the next book. What will have happened in the meantime? And I try to think of her as a kind of living, breathing person with a real cottage and a real dog and various men who she's finally sort of settled down a bit now, but it took her a wee while. And I think I have 4 main characters. Clare, obviously, is the chief one, her Sergeant Chris, Jim, who is the kind of uniformed desk sergeant, and Sarah, who is a uniformed PC, who eventually marries Chris. And I think that in every book, I need to do something with at least one of them, with more emphasis on developing Clare's character, because otherwise I'm just writing the same book every time with a different cast of characters. So I try to think, right, how would things move on in their lives? But I'm probably not any further ahead than the last book. There was one book I wrote, and I think it's the 3rd one, Lies to Tell. And at the end of it, Clare is trying to decide between 2 men. And I left it as a cliffhanger, and people sort of didn't like that. Some people, they said, what, we've got to wait for book 4 to find out who she chooses. And the truth is, I didn't know who she was going to choose. I could not decide. So I thought I'll give myself a few months until I have to start the next book. And, so I do apologise for that, but I honestly could not decide which way she was going to jump. So.
It's nice that you didn't force yourself to make a decision though at that point, and then
Well,
kind of
yes,
come to
I think
find
so.
it doesn't work when it comes to the next book.
That's the problem. If I had jumped one way and then at the start of the next book I wasn't feeling it, then I would have had to have some more Claire angst and have her work out, why did I choose this person when I really should have chosen that person. So I think even at the beginning of the book I may have slightly fudged it. She had made a choice, but anyway, oh goodness, it's the responsibility.
Yeah, I suppose you do feel a responsibility for these characters that you've created and put out there. As I mentioned, I've read the first book, and I'm reading this latest book. They both have they both focus on children and or certainly in the beginning of this book, crimes that involve children. But why choosing to focus on that? Because I think child exploitation, certainly, with social media and the internet, did you find that was something that was very important for you to include in the series as a subject matter?
Yes, so I'm trying not to give away too many spoilers, but in the first book, I knew I wanted to have a serial killer, someone who was systematically picking people off. And I didn't want it to be random. I wanted there to be a reason. And I wanted these people to be different from each other. And that was, so I came up with a reason, which I thought worked, I hope. And that was the reason for the first one. When it came to the last book, I had been haunted by the story of a young lad near Edinburgh who had very sadly thrown himself into the River Forth and died because he was being blackmailed by text message. And I thought that's something I'm going to write about because it struck me as being incredibly cruel. And I thought I'm going to shine a light on this. I had wanted to write about another crime, which I think is as bad, known as cuckooing. And that's where criminals, often an organised crime group, will take over the house of a vulnerable person, perhaps an older person or someone with learning difficulty that lives independently. And I found that I couldn't go there in my head because, like I suppose most people who are, most people have someone in their life that they worry about, someone who's vulnerable and that they don't want to be taken advantage of. And I just couldn't do it. I thought if I write this plot, I will have to take this person who's being exploited right down to rock bottom. Even if I resolve everything by the end, I will have to put them through hell and back. And I couldn't do it. I didn't want to go there in my head. So there's a little bit of self-preservation in there. But equally, I want to write about crimes that affect people and then to have the perpetrators brought to justice. So there's an element that it's mostly quite satisfying to do that. I have to be realistic, and sometimes Claire will have to accept that she can't charge people with what she wanted. We don't have plea bargaining in this country, but there will be an acceptance that, if someone delivers someone else up, then they might face a lesser charge unofficially. So sometimes I'll write a book and at the ending, people might contact me and say, I wish I knew what happened. Did that person get convicted? And I tend to stop. at the courtroom door because I'm not writing a court novel, much as I quite fancy the idea. So yes, I try to be fairly realistic, but hopefully the things that I write about are happening very, very rarely.
They do seem very well researched in terms of police procedure, is that something you wanted to make sure was accurate, or did you have to take artistic license at any point?
Well, I do. I both. I know lots of police officers, and I wouldn't want them reading the novel and putting their heads in their hands and saying what a lot of rubbish. And some of them have said to me, "Who's your source?" Because you've got some, you've hit it spot on. But I don't always. Normal police detection is tedious and repetitive and takes a long time. Claire is wonderful. She wraps her crimes up in a couple of weeks. If
I know she's very efficient.
She has a good cleanup rate.
Yeah.
But I think you can't write a crime novel in a realistic way because it would bore the reader. So, for example, if Claire questions someone, and then perhaps a couple of days later, some more evidence comes to light and she has to question them again, my editor will not let me away with having the same interview in the same circumstances twice. She'll say, you can't have Claire going back to that person's house. She's already done that. Do something different. So I might bring that person into the station, or I might send her to their workplace to speak to them there. So, just try to kind of mix it up a bit. But in reality, the police would probably re-interview again and again until they felt that they'd got to the truth.
We have a question from Sandra. She
Hi,
says,
Sandra.
do you enjoy reading other crime fiction and get inspired that way, or do you avoid it in order to be sure all your ideas are truly unique and original? What a great question, Sandra. Thank you.
That is an excellent question. And I think it's Chris Brookmyre doesn't read anything when he's writing a book because he doesn't want to have the other author's voice in his head. I do read all the crime fiction all the time. One of the lovely things about being an author is that you are sent books to give a quote for. So if you see, if you look up a book perhaps on Waterstones or Amazon, and you'll see that various authors have said nice things about it, that's when we get sent advanced review copies of the books. So I'll be reading them, and I also always have an audiobook in the car, a crime book. So I read lots and lots of crime fiction, and I think you can pinch little bits and pieces. You can be a magpie. You can pick up, oh, that's, gosh, I never thought about setting a scene in a swimming pool changing room or something like that. You can pinch little bits and pieces like that, but that doesn't change your own voice. And I think that's what marks out authors, that we all have a unique voice, hopefully, unless we're artificial intelligence. And I think I hope I can read without pinching any, without plagiarizing from someone else's book. I think that the voices of my characters are developing them as a completely separate experience, a completely separate piece of work, as opposed to reading someone else's book. So in a way, reading other people's books is a lovely escape. The difficulty is get the time to do it.
Yeah, especially if you're being sent books and you want to do things in a timely fashion as well, and fitting it all in and writing your own books at the same time. We actually had a question come in via email just before we started, which I'll read out now. So that this came from Andrew, who wanted to know if you could give your younger self any advice about being a writer or getting published, what would it be?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I want to say you can do crime fiction, so give it a go. But I also think that the intervening years have helped me find my writing voice, if you like. So perhaps what I would have written a few years ago wouldn't be the same as what I'm writing now. That's not to say that it would be not good, but I think I've learned a lot over the years by reading. So I suppose what I would say is you can write crime fiction, read widely across the genre, and you'll learn what publishers like. So that would be, yeah, I think, yeah, and right. Believe that you can do it, because I honestly, for years, I thought published authors were a breed apart, and that was not me. So believe in yourself. Everyone, not everyone is capable of being published, but you don't know until you try, so try. But also edit. Never send a first draft off, which I haven't done, but never send a first draft, because it won't be right, even if you've been editing as you go along. You should edit that first book until you cannot change another single word, because I hate these management speak cliches, but you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So you want it to be the absolute best it can be when it lands on an editor's desk.
Have you ever gone back and read a book that has been published and think, oh, I'd do that slightly differently, or I'd change it?
I don't want to know, because I can't change it now. And also, by the time a book is published, I've probably been through it about 9 or 10 times, and I'm sick of it. It's no longer interesting or funny or clever or all of the things I thought it might have been at one time. I'm so sick of it. So, I mean, sometimes I'll pick one up and I'll look at a scene, but I don't want to. I hope that across the 9 books that I've written, I've improved. Book 9 is coming out in January, so I realise there's only 8 out at the moment. But I hope I've improved, and I don't want to see the mistakes, because I can't change them. If it was something I could change, if I was being asked to redraft them, that would be different. But I'd rather not know.
I think I'd probably be the same. I'm quite excited. There's another book coming. I need to. That's what I'll be doing for Christmas, is reading. So Coco has asked, outside of crime novels, what is your favourite preferred genre to read?
That's a good question. So I quite enjoy the right kind of non-fiction book. The ones I've read recently have been related to crime, so probably not the best example. There's one that I read called We Are Bellingcat. I can't remember the author, but Bellingcat is an organisation that was originally self-funded. It's a not-for-profit. It's now being funded by some of the universities, and basically they are investigating the news stories that get buried, such as, or you can't get to the bottom of, like the jet, the Malaysian Airlines jet, or the Skripal poisoning, and they're at great personal risk to themselves. They have investigated these things. They've got people dotted all over the world who, some of them working undercover to try and find out who's behind these events. Well, I suppose we know who's behind them, but is there evidence as to who's behind them? So that kind of thing really interests me. The other one I read that's very similar is called People Hacker by Jenny Radcliffe. And this was basically confessions of a burglar, someone who has started out her life as a burglar housebreaker, and she turned into a kind of ethical housebreaker. People can hire her to check their security, and she'll say things like, I will leave a picture of Donald Duck in your desk drawer, or something like that. And they'll say, no, you'll never get past our security. And it's simply by watching human behavior, how people, you turn up a kind of, what do you call it? Sort of secure entry, like if you're going into a business and they've got a place where you've got to flash a pass, and you're wearing a business suit and you're dressed up, you're carrying a briefcase, and you're like, oh, I can't believe I've left my pass at home. Could you just buzz me? And oh, so sure. So they buzz the person in, and she's in. And then she'll go up back staircases, and she'll just had 1 or 2 narrow squeaks, but it was fascinating as to just how easy it is for a person who's skilled in human behavior to find their way into secure locations. Fiction, I do love a bit of Joanna Trollope. I love, she writes these books that are sort of, I suppose, unfairly called aga sagas, because they're about, I suppose, middle England, kind of wealthy middle class people, and it's about the human relationships and the behaviours. And it's a book. They're books I just sink into, like a warm blanket. But it is difficult finding the time. I've got a big pile of books I haven't even opened from last Christmas, so I'd better get on with them before this Christmas books arrive.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was a fantastic question, Coco.
Yes.
In terms of the book series, Bridges to Burn, they're all set in St Andrews.
Yeah.
Is that a particular place that's important to you, or is it just it worked for the characters? Why St Andrews in particular?
Yeah, good question. So when I started thinking about writing something commercial that had a chance of being published, I had a look around the market, and there was a lot of crime fiction series. And I wanted to write a series because essentially I'm quite lazy and I don't like making up characters. So the idea of being able to use the same characters again and again was very appealing. So I knew it was going to be a crime series, and there's a lot of crime fiction books that are set in Glasgow and Edinburgh in Scotland. And I was going to write a Scottish one because I thought the Tartan Noir label, as we said earlier, is a very good marketing thing. I live about 11 miles from St Andrews, and I actually lived there for a year. And it is a historic town. And the reason I thought it would work well is because it has a very varied population. It's not a huge town, but there's probably about 9 or 10,000 students come in every year to the university because it's quite a prestigious university. It's the one that people that perhaps don't get into Oxford or Cambridge will come up to study at from England and Wales. It also has lots of tourists because it's an ancient town. And then there's the Old Course Golf Course, which is one of the most famous golf courses in the world. And the Open Championship will be played there in rotation with the other golf clubs in the UK. So every 4 or 5 years, there'll be a massive influx of golf fans and professionals. And sometimes it will be the Pro-Am tournaments and things as well. So the town is swollen with all these visitors and the students and the academics and researchers. And then there's the locals who put up with it all. And I thought, this is a very small town, but it has such potential. And it's very easy for me to pop over there and look at things and soak up the atmosphere and get a feel for it. Of course, shortly after my first book was published, we had lockdown. So I wasn't able to go anywhere. But thanks to Google Street View, I can visit the town quite easily. The downside is that I've now written 9 books and it's getting very hard to find places to leave bodies. There's a street, in a very long street that cuts through the middle, and I think statistically that's the most dangerous place to live in this world.
I suppose you can't just make up a place because it is a well-known place and your readers potentially know it. You can't just add a random street in there.
I don't add random streets. I never do house numbers. Although the Scottish writer Stuart McBride has got a neat trick. He'll take a street that everyone knows and he'll add a house number that doesn't exist. So if it stops at 80, he'll have somebody at 96, which is quite clever. I tend to fudge which house it is, but I'll name the street. But I do make up pubs and restaurants and things like that because I think some of them wouldn't necessarily like to know that a body had been found on the premises or a member of staff was a criminal or a victim. So I'll have real streets but made up places.
Cool. Coco says it's getting hard finding places to leave the bodies, and she's laughing.
It's the problem is real, Coco. I mean, it's people will nominate things as well. Would you kill my boss? Is quite a common one, and I haven't done that yet. They've also suggested places where I can leave bodies, but one person did say to me, "Right, okay, what about a body in our house?" I said, "You're on." And then when it came to writing the book, I said, "No, I'm just checking that you're okay with this," and they were like, maybe not. So I had to pull back on that one. But I can make up cottages. Clare's cottage doesn't exist, but it's
It
the road.
sounds lovely.
Oh, it's perfect.
It's the best cottage ever.
Yeah. So I'm living vicariously through Clare. All the good things that she has, like having a lovely cottage and having a partner who cooks so well, and she can run fast as well, which I certainly can't. So I'm getting out all my kind of
Yeah,
ambitions through Clare.
too Claire. So in terms of audiobooks, you read the first,
First
definitely
six.
the first six of them. Was that something you always wanted to do, or were you persuaded to do?
Okay, so the first book came out in October 2019, and I think the audiobook rights were sold early in 2020, like maybe February or something like that. And of course, we all know what happened after that. In March 2020, we went into lockdown. But the audiobook company wanted to get the book out there because they were investing in it. And in the meantime, because bookshops were closed, we were relying on people downloading ebooks and so on from Amazon and Kobo. And my agent said, we'd like you to do a reading and put it on YouTube, and it might encourage some people to download the book. So I said, okay. So I did a reading, and because I think my second book came out very close to lockdown, I had written both when I was signed by my publisher. So they put one out in October 19, and the second one came out in February 2020. So, and then everything stopped. So I did a reading from my second book. And a little while later, my agent contacted me and said, so we think you should read your audiobook. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not a voice actor. Let's leave it to the professionals. And she said, no, she says, really, we think it would be a good thing to do. I said, okay. She said, tell you what, if you ask they had a books to screen agent at that time. If you ask him to have a look at the YouTube recording that I made and then come back to me. She said, no, we've done that already. He's quite happy. He thinks you should read it. And I could feel myself getting backed into this corner. And she said, plus it would be good for your author brand, whatever that is. In the end, I agreed. And I really wish I hadn't. But, I kept it going for 6 books. It's very, very hard work. I'm talking to you now, and this is lovely. I've got a drink by my side I can have if I need to. But when you're reading an audiobook, it's continuous. You're not really pausing other than at the end of a chapter when you go, you can't have a drink of water because the microphone is incredibly sensitive and water makes a lot of noise going all the way down. You wouldn't think it because you're not listening, but and your mouth dries very, very quickly when you're reading constantly. I mean, if you doubt this, take a book out of your bookshelf and challenge yourself to read a chapter. It's harder work than it looks. And then I'm not really very good at accents and things like that. And I thought, I don't really want to try because there's nothing worse than someone trying and failing to do an accent. That, you're better not trying at all. And I found myself, I can't think it was the last book, and I was reading out and I had no idea this was coming. He spoke with a faint Hebridean accent. And I thought, what? Why did I write that? And immediately I'm thrown into dialogue. And my son has a friend who comes from the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. And she has a lovely sort of lilting sort of voice. And I tried instantly to channel her in the hope that I would sort of carry it off. And at that point, I thought, I'm not doing this ever again. Because I was starting to not want to write characters who weren't Scottish women. And sometimes when I was doing the recording, I would have a voice for Claire and a voice for Chris, and it would get mixed up. Have to do it again. So I just, and it's also, I was doing it from home studio, which it's not a studio, it's my study, and it's got there were duvets and pillows everywhere to try and pad the sound, but that didn't stop the birds singing or the bin lorry coming along or somebody cutting their hedges. And then one day, the absolute worst thing, I had just finished recording 90 minutes of continuous reading, which is a long, long time.
Yeah.
And the way we were working, because my internet signal wasn't amazing, I was working down the line with an editor, a technician, and I was reading and then I was saving the file, which would take about 3 or 4 minutes to save because it was massive. And then I was using a large file transfer service to send it to him, and he was saving it, and then we would go on to the next bit. And I had literally just finished saving this file and got to about, it just said saved. And like 3 or 4 seconds later, my computer shut down because I'd had pillows and everything round the back of it. It was a big tower computer and it had overheated. And I nearly lost 90 minutes. So as the books went on, I thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's very, very hard work. And I knew the Scottish actor, Helen Derbyshire, who's taken over. I knew her personally, and I really wanted her to do it from the start, but I'd been persuaded to do it. And I said to Helen, would you do it from book 7 onwards? And she said she would. And she actually, to my mortification, she listened to my recordings, which, when you've got a professional actor listening to you, it's just, please don't. But the fact that she listened to it, she said, I'm going to try and tune into what you did so that it will be not a difficult transition for people that liked it. And some people have said it's great and some people have said it's not great. But then lots of people gave me a slanging for my narration and, I had some cracking reviews that were just awful, saying, how bad I was. And also, having had COVID, I don't know if you can hear, my throat's never been quite the same since. I had 2 bouts of COVID and I've just ended up with a very, I've been coughing a little bit today, a very scratchy throat. I thought, there's no way I can narrate an audiobook now. I just, I'm not up to it. So time to hand over to the person who should have done it from the start.
I think you did a brilliant job.
That's kind, thank you.
And especially, maybe there's a lot of training that goes into being an actor and then being a voice actor specifically.
They are incredible. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. And as you say, that constant reading,
yes.
a 6-hour book can take, twice, sometimes 3 times as long.
Half days, solid
Yeah.
reading. And then you have probably a couple of hours, a fortnight later, when the proofreader has listened to it and checked, found all your mistakes. There's a couple of hours where you just record all the little short bits where you got something wrong or where, your tummy rumbled. That happens quite a lot. When we had a lunch break, I used to race to the kitchen and eat a sandwich, a pre-made sandwich, as fast as I could, because I knew it was going to take sort of 20 to 30 minutes to digest and go all the way through and stop making a noise. And you just don't realise these things until you've got a highly sensitive microphone sitting in front of you. Yeah,
I'm always told don't have a cup of tea. Any kind of milky drink.
I got very good at taking a tiny amount of water and just moisturising the inside of my mouth, the tight, like quarter of a teaspoon. I got very good at doing that between chapters and not making any noise.
Wow. Yeah.
Huge
well, I think
you
did a great job. And I think Helen does a lovely job as well.
Thank you. I do.
I'll just have a quick look at the time. Please do put any other questions you want to ask Marion, just in the last 5-10 minutes or so. Do you think that has a experience of being the voice actor that has to read the book that that it's affected how you write and how you describe something, or the different character voices that you put in there?
I think I always read my own books out loud before I send them into my editor, because you hear mistakes that you wouldn't normally spot. You realise that you're repeating phrases, that Claire is rolling her eyes yet again, or shrugging or nodding. You realise that you've started 3 sentences in a row with Claire did this, Claire did that, Claire did the next thing. So you spot things. So I do know how it sounds, but I was getting to the stage where I was thinking, I'm not going to write that because I'll have to read it. I'm not going to put someone in. I wanted to have a character in, I think it's book 7, A Blind Eye, where it was an Eastern European woman who had Eastern European parents, but had been largely brought up in Scotland. So her accent was going to be a bit of both. And Helen was really excited about that. She says, I can't wait to do that. I was dreading it from the point of view of reading it. So it's kind of given me a bit more freedom, but it also makes me conscious that this is a completely different medium. And if I'm going to write a book, I need it to work as an ebook, as a print copy, and as an audiobook. So it does make me conscious of that. I'm not sure that I do an awful lot that's different, other than I try not to have too many people with foreign accents.
Just make Helen's
Also,
life a bit easier.
People that might be similar.
Yeah.
Like if there's, let's say, my 4 friends, the 4 40-year-old men. I can't remember how I did that, and I don't want to listen to it because it'd be embarrassing. But, I would probably try to make them different in some way so that the voice actor, that Helen, would have something to work on there.
Mm-hmm. So we've got a question for Jenny, or from Jenny, sorry. Is there another genre that you haven't written but would like to try?
I'd love to have a go at science fiction. It's quite a hard sell these days. It's quite hard to get a sci-fi novel taken up by a publisher. But I love the idea that you can make up your own rules. Because I'm writing police procedural novels, you have to stick by the law, what the police can do. I don't want Claire to be one of those maverick detectives that shuts the door and then assaults a witness until they tell the truth. I want her to stick as far as possible to the rules. She maybe makes the odd kind of bad decision, but mostly I want her to play by the rules and to find proper legal methods of working out how she can nail the perpetrator. With science fiction, you can do what you like. You can make things up. So I love the idea of doing that. That would be my palate cleanser if I wanted to do that. I keep thinking about weird things I could do.
Do you think you could kind of continue with the Clare series and also write a sci-fi novel at the same time, or do you very much focus on the?
Yeah, well, maybe not at the same time. Well, between Clare books, yeah.
Yeah.
The difficulty is that writing a book is a huge investment of time and effort. And if I didn't think it was going to be published, I probably wouldn't do it because it is really hard work.
Not even on a kind of a personal project level.
I do short stories. I love writing short stories. They're great fun, and I'll sometimes write one for a competition or just for fun. There's a special offer on at the moment, which is if you pre-order the 9th book, either from books in print or ebook, not audio, unfortunately, and you go to my publisher's website. The publisher is Canelo, Canelo. They have a special offer of a short story that you'll be sent if you can upload proof of pre-order. So that would be a photograph of your receipt or a snip of of the screenshot of your email or whatever. There is a Clare short story that will be sent out the day after publication day to anyone who has pre-ordered and can send in proof.
Oh, fantastic.
So short stories are great because you don't always have to tie everything up with a bow.
Yeah, they're kind of more self-contained, but it's nice when you have the kind of the background of all the other things that have happened to them as well. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm just having a quick look at the time. We're running out of time. So I will probably just end on this question. What is next for Clare? There's a lot of things. I don't want to give it away if you haven't read Bridges to Burn yet, but there's lots of exciting things happening to her friends. Her life has changed slightly. There's new partnerships in there. What is going to happen next for her?
Okay, so book 9 is called Dead Man's Shoes, and that's another Clare novel. And at the end of Dead Man's Shoes, there's another of those what do you do moments. But I can tell you that I'm not going to kill her off because I've just started writing book 10. And if I think really hard, I can remember what it's about, but I can't actually because we've just finished doing Book Week Scotland up here, which involves libraries booking authors, and I had 3 talks, not all the same type of talk, depending on what people want. So I had 3 talks last week. So I didn't do any writing last week, and then had a busy weekend and a busy day yesterday and another busy day today. So I'm hoping to get back to doing some writing tonight after I watch the Bake Off final. And
is that tonight? Is that Woody's final?
Yes, it's the final. It's the final. And I think that Dylan will win. But that's just a guess. So we'll see. But anyway, so I then need to get back to writing book 10. And I'm trying so hard to think what it's about. And I honestly can't remember because I've been talking about book 8, Bridges to Burn. I've been reviewing book 9, Dead Man's Shoes, and trying to write book 10. And honestly, I'm sitting here, I have no idea what it's about. I will, when I get to the computer and I zone in, I'll think, oh yes, I remember now. But so Claire, at the end of book 9, has a decision to make. And then book 10 picks up with her having made that decision. And we see what's going to happen after that.
Oh, well, I'm very much looking forward to
Thank you.
to discovering what happens. I've enjoyed the series, the ones I've read so far, and I'm definitely going to finish those. If anyone wants to borrow Bridges to Burn, if you're a Listening Books member, you can do that with your membership. If you have an illness, disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition, and you're interested in becoming a Listening Books member, then please do visit our website and find out more about that. Thank you very much, Marion, for joining us for this Q&A. It's been brilliant. I'm going to finish this and then go do some reading. If you want to join more of these Q&As, do keep an eye on the Virtual Village Hall website, and we'll also put it on our social media pages as well. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a really good session, so thank you.
And thank you, everybody. It's been lovely being part of this. Thank you so much for asking me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming along. Cheers. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.